morning. Welcome to FEBE 3. FEBE 3 is a project that combines SBDC, Glide, and LaunchNet, all three entities here, located here right on campus. We're sponsored and have been sponsored for the last 2.5, going on 3 years by Dunkin' Donuts, which is across the street by the local franchisee, Dave Sisson. Dave has 3 stores, the one directly across the street from our campus, also one on West 150th and one on 58 in Amherst. So whenever you're in the area and you would like a good cup of coffee or a good sandwich, feel free to stop by either their drive-through or go inside, and thank them for sponsoring FEBE. We would appreciate if you would carry that message across. If you recall, if you were here last week, we had Jim Haggerty from FranNet talk to us and talk about basically what goes on with franchises and how they can help service. And we figured that we would continue on the franchise mode, and we have a new franchise restaurant in our immediate area of the college. What's the name of it? Jimmy John's. And Jimmy John's, I've been a fan of Jimmy John's for quite a while. Unbeknownst to me, Tim owned the one in Avon, and I've gone to that a number of times. And then I found his other one in Lakewood, which is buried sort of in a cave underneath a building in downtown Lakewood. And I've got to tell you a story there. Whenever I'd go into Avon, I'd always have my sandwich cut in half. And I'd always say I want it cut diagonally. And I'd get facial expressions, what, etc. So anyway, I did that for a year or two. And then I found the one in Lakewood, and I went in and I said, I'd like to have my sandwich cut in half. And immediately the fellow that was serving said, oh, you're from Avon, aren't you? So anyway, it's a good sandwich. Without any further ado, Tim, I'd like to introduce you to Tim Hughes. He's the father of Jimmy John's in Sheffield, Avon, and Lakewood. Tim?
Well, thank you. Came to speak primarily about my franchise experience and give you a little background about myself, my family, and so forth. I never really thought about being a franchise owner. I never really thought about being a business owner other than dreaming about it. Started out after the military, didn't know quite what to do, stumbled around and became a firefighter in Bay Village, became a captain there. After that, realizing that I wasn't making ends meet at home, I became a registered nurse and did that on my days off in critical care. And out of that, I parlayed those two into training and educating paramedics and EMS firefighters here in Lorain County and Medina County over the last 15, 16 years. I have to give a lot of credit, though, to my wife. She held everything together at home, but besides that, she's extremely accomplished herself. She was an experiment right out of high school by the Ohio Bell Telephone Company, and they made her a service representative. Previously, it had all been college students. From there, she parlayed that into being an educator, a trainer, and very well versed in business and business practices with the Ohio Bell Telephone Company. All these things go together and become very important when we start talking about where I am right now. From there, she ended up going off and raising a family, sitting on some community boards, raising 4 kids, one of them with a disability. And from there, she became a registered nurse at St. John's Hospital, probably the bane of the CEO's existence because she always spoke up. But from her being there, she had changed systems within the hospital and the 2 floors she worked on. After injuring herself at work, she found she couldn't work the floor anymore, so she ended up going off and working with the adult mentally retarded. In doing that, she ended up bringing a lot of income, a lot of financial stability to the company, and new systems and procedures there. My son, Tim, he started out in the restaurant business, and as in all restaurant businesses, you excel to a certain ceiling, and in most cases, you just can't go on. And we saw that, and we knew that he was very proficient in what he did. We'll speak a little bit more about that as I go on, but it truly is a family experience, and that's where I'm going with this. If you ever go into my stores, you notice that there's signs on the wall. And when we were looking at what franchises to get into and so forth, I took my brother, who tends to be a little irreverent, and he read all the signs, and he says, "You have to do this. The signs are great." And so here's one of the signs, and it says experience. And experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And that's so true. And so as we worked in our businesses and in our experiences, we realized that we were doing a lot for other people. We realized that we were making other people wealthy. We were making people very accomplished and recognized in the community. Not that that's bad, but we realized we had more to offer for ourselves. So I've already talked to you about Barb. I talked to you about myself. I talked to you a little bit about Tim. And if you ever go in the stores, you'll see him. You won't see me too much. And then there's Amy. And Amy is our special needs child, but she is truly excelled at what she did. Because of her brothers, because of her mother, she is able to work in these stores, and truly we put this together partially for Amy. So it's been a long-standing dream. I could have put this title on this as either the flower shop or the Italian nightclub. When I started out in the military, I was the oldest of 12, and when I was in the military, I had some freedom I hadn't experienced before. And I experienced a sandwich. At that time, I didn't go out and get sandwiches. I didn't even get too many McDonald's. But I would walk from the ship to the baseball diamond over in Philadelphia, and there was a Society for the Blind shop there. And they had a sandwich that was an Italian sub sandwich. And it tastes exactly like the number 9 or the Italian nightclub at Jimmy John's. For a year and a half, I didn't eat another sandwich at that shop. I didn't even know what the other sandwiches tasted like. But I knew it was the best sandwich I had ever had. The flower shop. When I got married and I didn't know what I was going to do, I had a neighbor that owned a flower shop across the street from Fairview Hospital. And I thought, wouldn't that be nice to have a flower shop where I had a built-in community that would use my product? So we had all these little dreams. We work hard for ourselves. I wanted to provide a legacy both for my sons and for Amy. I wanted to ensure that she would do fine when as I tell my boss when I first met him, gravity doesn't pull us back up. And we believed in ourselves, and we always talked about it, but we never thought it would come to fruition. The one thing I know about my family is that we're extremely hardworking, though we don't give ourselves credit for it. And in 2008, I think everybody realizes that the economy was very unsteady and uncertain. I worked for Elyria Hospital, training people out there. I realized that I was in a middle management position over there, and EMS educators can be replaced in all sorts of different medias. And I thought, I didn't necessarily need the money, but I wanted the legacy. So I started looking around. I was also the fire marshal that oversaw the building of Crocker Park at that time. I worked part-time one area and part-time in the other for that 4-year period. And I left that because my brother, who's very accomplished, ends up as the fire chief, and I can't work for my brother. And I remind him all the time. So I saw that job going away that I liked a lot, and I saw potentially another job that I really liked going away. The chance to have a legacy was very much in my mind, and my brother, who's a dentist in Avon, had said, "Did you ever think of investing in yourself?" And a fire alarm specialist that I was doing an inspection with at Crocker Park, and a friend of mine for a long time said, "Have you ever heard of Jimmy John's?" I said, "No." He says, "Well, maybe you should look at it. They know how to make sandwiches." I said, "So where do I go?" He says, "I have a store down in Medina. Why don't you stop down?" That was the first I ever did. I didn't go into this looking at franchises. The franchise found me. I don't know if I'm the norm or not. I sort of stumble into things. So 2008 had a lot to do with this. So as we heard last week, and as I'll probably reinforce this week, is that why do people get into franchises? Why would I think about getting a franchise? We heard my story, but we wanted to work for ourselves. When I looked at it, and I talked to this fire alarm specialist, his name is Joe. Joe said they know how to make sandwiches. They had an existing product. I said, "What makes you so special?" He says, "Tim, they're in every college town. You can't believe it. The marketing's already done for you." So I thought, wow. I didn't know anything about it. Medina was one of the first ones, one down at Steelyard Commons, down by Metro Hospital, and a new one across from Cleveland State had just opened up. So I thought, well, we'll take a road trip. So my brother read all the signs, and his daughters who were in college said, "Hey, the music is great." It's not so great right now, but we have some discussions about that. But the music is very hip for the kids, and we thought that's great. And I came home and I have 3 neighbors at Marquette and one soon to go into Marquette. All 4 of them were on the front lawn, and I said, "Hey, you guys, what do you think about Jimmy John's?" And they said, "Mr. Hughes, it is the best thing in the world." And Neil, the youngest, said, "You know what? I don't like sub sandwiches." And his sister jumped all over him and said, "You will at 2 o'clock in the morning when you're cramming for finals." And now Neil is a Jimmy John's fan. So I realized right then and there that I had a market. I realized that I had a product, the number 9 or the Italian nightclub. I hadn't tasted any other sandwich. It has established methods. I worked in the Navy. I worked in the fire department. I trained medics. I realized systems work. I am a systems guy. I do not come up with these ideas to open up a sandwich shop. Maybe some of you people here do. Some of the entrepreneurs come out and they come with these great ideas and you make your businesses work. I'm not that type of person. I'm the person that sits in the English class and the last 10 minutes of the class start writing my first sentence on the paper that I'm supposed to write. Because I can't come up with the ideas, I can't put them together, but I can work systems. On the ship, I was an operations specialist, worked in the Combat Information Center, a radarman, told a captain on the ship how to turn his ship and where to go. And how did I do that? I did it with checklists. And I was one of the oldest guys on the ship. I was 21. A billion-dollar ship, a multi-billion-dollar ship, and they're listening to me. Well, if I can do it for a multi-billion-dollar ship and people give me a checkoff list and they can give me a system, I sure as heck can do it. And that's what was brought to me here. Franchises bring you opening support. They bring you financing direction. They bring you opening and training and opening procedures. They provide ongoing support, sometimes the bane of my existence, but definitely a way to keep the product current, keep me fresh, and keep me the same throughout the country. There's about 2,500 stores right now. There's about 3,000 franchises, licenses out there. Maybe a little bit more. Those numbers aren't quite up to date, but that's close. Get a lot of peer support from people in town. you get national and regional advertising. We do a lot of local advertising on our own. So why Jimmy John's? Well, as I started looking into it, I got on the internet and I looked. And you can't talk about Jimmy John's without talking to the guy that started it. And his story is worth bringing to the forefront too, because unlike me, he had the idea. He had the idea out of necessity. His name is Jimmy Liautaud. Jim was second last in his high school class. He had 3 very accomplished brothers, and he had a father that was very accomplished. And his father said to him when he graduated, you can go to college, you can go to the military, or you can take $20,000 and get out of the house, but you're leaving, okay? And being the person he is, and you have to meet him, he took the $20,000, and in 1983, he opened his sandwich shop. He opened it with styrofoam cups in a garage in a back alley in by the campus of Eastern Illinois. He figured he had a market because there was a bunch of kids that were away from home and they didn't know how to fix dinner, and he could do it. And he loved to cook, and he knew how to make bread, and he knew how to make cookies with his mom and his grandmother. So he went out with his $20,000, rented this garage, put together some equipment from used kitchen equipment, and he sliced meat, he made sandwiches, and nobody came. So he decided he had to do something for marketing. He bought himself an old VW van. I tried to find pictures of it, I couldn't. But it looks very much like this little shack here. And he started driving around campus with sandwiches the size of the ones you see over here on this party platter. Wrapped them individually and gave them to people, and soon people started coming. Out of that, it's grown since 1983 into the numbers I just mentioned to you. Now I'm back to myself, and we opened up in 2011. We started thinking about it in 2008. We started looking heavily at it throughout that time, and then in 2011, we opened our doors in October in Avon. It was a hit. My marketing was done for me. It's a city with some expendable income, college educated, and they already knew Jimmy John's. My doors opened and I wasn't sure I was going to be able to handle the crowd. Now it does just fine, and I have a steady flow of customers, and frequently they are repeat customers. And I pride myself on my staff, as Lee had said, how well they do and how well they treat their customers, to the fact that they even knew that he was from Avon because he wanted his sandwich cut in half. Not everybody does that. They just recognized him. And it happened to be a manager that started out with me in 2011 in Avon. We opened Lakewood, a distress store, a store that Jimmy John's came to me, and I had just gone to a convention and drank the Kool-Aid and came back, and they said, oh, you could do it, Tim, and it was distressed, and I had many sleepless nights. We opened that store in 2013, in June, and then just in August of this year in Sheffield. Each a very unique beast. And I think this is where the lessons are if you're going into business. So in Jimmy John's, just a little bit about us, we do delivery. We say we're freaky fast. Ideally, we like to get the sandwich out in 5 minutes. We like to be on the road in 5 minutes, and we like to have the sandwich delivered to you within 15 minutes from the time that it's delivered. I work for the Liautaud Hospital, and one of the doctors I work for works over at the Avon emergency room, and they take bets when we deliver over there. They all bet in 15-second increments on the closest one gets their sandwich for free. So it's pretty interesting, but it is, we pride ourselves on being exceptional. We don't pride ourselves on driving fast. We tell them be fast on their feet and not on the street. We expect that they don't have accidents. We don't want to be in the news. We just want you to have your sandwich. We want it at your desk. We will deliver one at a time, so if you're working at your desk and you just don't have time to get up, we'll deliver that to you. We do catering. We've catered, Jimmy John's the franchise in Washington, D.C. has catered the White House. The ones in Columbus and the State House have delivered and catered to the governor. One of the interesting things that I found is that I was at a conference on the east side, and they overbooked the conference and they oversold the lunch. And Jimmy John's is perfect for filling in that, because we can make our sandwiches fast and get them out to backfill any short-term needs. But it is truly about the sandwich. The Italian nightclub. I want to look for it specifically. Capicola, ham, salami, a variety of spices and vegetables. But it is truly about the sandwich. And I pride myself, I always marvel at the fact that the sandwiches look very much like what you see in the advertisements. It's not always like that in most foods. So we have an established product. We have an established brand. Our bread is fresh. My son, when he first started, I saw him out on the street passing out samples. He's going, "Here, the bread's like crack, you'll come back." I'm not sure that I espouse to that, but I do like the fact that they come back. The bread is what sells. As a fire marshal, I knew that I didn't have grease. I didn't have a mess. I didn't have a lot of systems that I had to work with, from building systems, and all I had to do was bake bread. We have two breads. We have a French bread and a seven grain wheat bread. And the bread, to me, really makes a sandwich, but all the product inside is sliced fresh daily. And so it's a recognizable brand because it's consistent and because it's fresh. And it has an established customer base. It's high quality. There are only 6 meats, 1 cheese, a variety of vegetables, and 2 breads. And of course, as you see up here, the Italian nightclub wrapped in lettuce, which is our lettuce wrap. So if you're looking for a salad, that's what we have. But there are 25 sandwiches made of those combinations. And then there are a variety of people that ask for different things. So we do make some adjustments, but we try to stick with those 25 sandwiches. We try to stay with high quality condiments also, Hellmann's, Grey Poupon, and so forth. The meat is all muscle meat, and I found it interesting. Jimmy went out hunting. Now, I'll talk about that in a little bit, okay, at the end. But he was out with the owner of, I think it was, no, it was one of his purveyors, like, Sarah Lee. And as he's sitting there and not seeing anything, you get into some small talk, and he says, "So what's in my roast beef?" And he says, "Well, there's roast beef, salt and pepper, garlic, and dextrose." And Jim, playing the dumb person, which he's not, he looks at me and goes, "Dextrose, what's dextrose?" And the guy says, "Well, it's a flavor enhancer." He says, "That doesn't tell me a whole lot. What is dextrose?" He says, "Well, it's sugar." He says, "Get it out." He says, "I don't eat my roast beef with sugar on it." So it tells you a little bit about the product. He samples his products daily. When I went to training, and Tim went to training in Champaign, Illinois, where their corporate headquarters are, we would have to serve up lunches to him and make them and send them, and then they would tinker with their recipes, and to this date, they haven't changed them. So it's very good. It's quick. There's no gimmicks. They espouse to this 1-minute manager. Basically give 3 praises and 3 takeaways, and we do that every day in our store, and I think it helps my staff. I still have about 20% of my staff in Avon from the day we started in 2011. This college helps, by the way, because they matriculate through and they stay there and work for me until they're done. And a couple of them have gone on to be managers in my business model. But the 1-minute manager espouses to that. Praise them, but if you're going to give any criticism, you make sure you give them some praises and try and keep it simple. Try to keep it to the point and don't overload people. We have a solid menu, 25 sandwiches, 6 meats, 1 cheese. It's a clean store. When we took our trip to Medina, my wife wasn't quite sure. I always come up with the ideas. She's the person that takes care of the money. She's the person that takes care of the books. Tim is the person that takes care of the operations. I am the dreamer. And she gets up from the table and walks back after my brother says, well, the signs are irreverent, and my nieces say that the music's great. My wife comes back and says, well, buy it. And I said, why would we buy it? She says, the bathroom is immaculate. And so, and in fact, in Avon, I have a lot of people that just come through my store to use my bathroom, which is fine with me. Sandwiches are freaky fast, and they're made to order. And they do provide exceptional support. And I think if you're looking at any franchise, you want to be able to have some support. What they do is they have a real estate team that looks at sites. And sometimes I think I'm smarter than them, and I talk to them about it, and we have sort of heated discussions off and on, but they really do have their act together. Financing direction. If you don't know anything about financing, they have some recommendations on where to go, and I used them the first time, but then I realized that in the financing that I was able to make some of these decisions myself, and they tended to shop the bigger banks. And the smaller banks may be where you want to look. Opening and training procedures. All of my managers get 3 weeks of training in Champaign, and then they get ongoing training in the store for at least another month, if not more. We have 3 managers for each store. It's probably a little bit heavy by some designs, but it works. Your ongoing support, coaching and training. We get graded every 4 weeks. Coach comes in, but yet he confers with others in the store and lets them know, is your bread good, is it not? They try to keep the brand consistent. Is your store clean? And we get a grade on that. Training both in Champaign and ongoing training in the stores. Quality control and improvement. Increased purchasing power. They have now bought up a number of the futures for wheat for the next 5 years. They've locked them in at a low price. That's really important. When the bacon bottomed out, we already had some of the bacon market locked in. The chips, Dandy was making them for us, and now Dandy makes them for us in Jimmy's plants, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. So we have a lot of support. We have consistency for brand throughout the country. And I think those are things that you would want to look at. Peer support is extremely important. It's not as strong here in the Cleveland area as it could be, but it's getting there as it's growing. National regional advertising, people like Guy Fieri, Kevin Harvick in racing, Brock Lesnar in big time wrestling. I don't know the name of it, but my son laughs. But recognizable people. I was watching the playoffs in Chicago and saw our banner up in center field as they made a spectacular catch, and it was advertised on a frequent basis. But there are disadvantages that go with this. If you want to work truly for yourself, don't get into a franchise. You're working for the franchise, all right? We are an end distributor for the franchise. You do have some control, and depending on what franchise you have, you may have more or less control. Operations are bound by your franchise agreement. Make sure you read it. Make sure you get an attorney. It's very important. It's voluminous, but it is well worth being read. The products, services, pricing, and territory are all dictated to you. My territory, my delivery area here is very confined. My Lakewood is maybe too big. So when you're talking about disadvantages, you have initial franchise fees. You have ongoing royalties. 6% of my gross goes to Jimmy John's right off the top for his royalties, and 4.5% go for national advertising. And then you're stuck with image. I told you that Jimmy's is a hunter. And frequently I get calls, well, he's out there shooting, Bambi or whatever. And I'm going, oh no. And you get stuck with whatever that stigma is. We're not Jimmy, but we do represent him. So sometimes you're stuck with the stigma. Maybe you have a store that's underperforming, such as my Lakewood store, and you have to overcome those things. So you're locked with your neighbor and your peers in the business, and sometimes it can be frustrating. So your lessons learned. I have 3 stores, and each one brought something new. The first thing I realized is that location is extremely important. If you know Avon, across the street from Avon Commons is where I'm located. It's right underneath the water tower over there by Mark's. And it was a little trying at first. We're going, well, everybody's shopping across the street, but everybody comes out and everybody crests the hill and they look right at my sign. And a lot of people shop at Mark's. So we found that the traffic was really good. The type of people that we had there were the type of people that enjoyed my sandwich. And then we saw restaurants open up to the right and left of us. We came in after Chipotle, and Chipotle was bemoaning the fact that we came in and they said, oh, this is not going to be good for us. But in fact, when we talked to them later, their business increased by 10%. Then Liquid Planet came in next to us, or Liquid Earth. He has different stores by different names. And we thought, oh, this is not going to be good. And when we looked at it, our business increased. And my staff, these young people right out of high school, are standing there getting upset that people are parking in front and coming back and eating with their Chipotle and their Liquid Earth on the tables. And I said, yeah, but their son and the husband just walked into your store and bought a Jimmy John's sandwich. And there is a synergistic effect when you have a group of stores together. Don't try and be the only one out there. Try and get yourself into a neighborhood. So, location is extremely important to you. Excuse me, but banking is not always your friend. In fact, there's a saying. I have one special for you. We have a saying in our family that when my wife's right eyebrow goes up, everybody should run. Well, when we were signing our loan papers, I wish I wasn't there. But there are many times, make sure when you're dealing with the banks that you're right up front with them initially and say, I want to know what all the fees are, what all the undisclosed fees are. That really surprised us at the end. I thought I was very smart because I had these 3 different banks vying for my business, and I'm looking at them and I'm going, boy, I got a great loan, and I did, but they encumbered almost all of my assets. So it's something that you have to be looking at, and what do you want to get out of it? What do you want to leave liquid? What do you not want to leave liquid? Your banker can be your best asset as long as you open up an open and frank conversation with them. But I was dealing from a position of ignorance when I first started. I learned from this experience. A good contract and real estate lawyer is extremely important. You want somebody that's going to look it over, somebody that's seen it before and looks at it and says, do you know what a triple net lease is? Do you know what your expenses are going to be in the long run? Do you know what you're signing on the dotted line for? And on the other hand, he can turn around and tell you, you don't want this in here. Now, many times you're stuck in a franchise because they have a boilerplate and they will tell you that this is the way it's going to be. Can you live? Many times it just came down to, can you live with this? So it's important that you look at that. The franchisor is also not necessarily your friend. The day I opened up my Avon store, Jimmy John's called me and said, you can have the Westlake store, but we need to know today. All of my assets were encumbered, and I had no way of doing it. And I knew that I had a very successful franchisee that was coming in and potentially either enhancing my business or taking some of my business. As it turns out, we have a good synergistic effect right now. And then you need to train and trust your management. As my son will attest, I'm not always the best at letting the reins go. But I found that it was really important that I had to get them properly trained and to loosen up on the reins. And in doing so, I think I have a really good management staff. If you treat your staff well, they'll treat you well, and they'll return the favor. I told you that in Avon, I've kept about 20% of my staff, and those that I've kept have gone on to management. And of those that I kept, they brought their friends to me, and they're still with us, both over here at Sheffield and over in Lakewood. Lakewood, it's a cave. It's down half a level. It carries the Detroit Avenue address when it faces Warren Road. It has a gated parking lot, though parking for Jimmy John's is free. The perception is everything. When we bought it because it was a distressed business. They wanted us to take it over because they knew that we were running Avon well. I had many sleepless nights. When they would go out and sample, we were getting input back that we'll never order there again. They don't deliver, and when they deliver the wrong sandwich or they deliver it late. And so we had to overcome that, and we sent people out and pounded the street, talked to them, handed out sandwiches, and talked about what was going on. Again, a good lawyer. I was purchasing something that was already established. It brought a whole new set of things, such as workman's comp. Workman's comp carries through from owner to owner in the state of Ohio. That's scary. Any injury that happens before, that encumbers you. So you need to be aware of it. And your lawyer should be able to help you with that. Know your demographics. Well, I knew my demographics. I knew what Jimmy John's did in Avon, and it worked. And I looked at the demographics in Lakewood, 12,000 lunches within 3 square blocks, 60,000 people in 7 square miles, the most dense population between New York and Chicago. How could I go wrong? I was raised in Lakewood. I knew what was going on here. But the mean age is 27. Mean age sounded good to me. They like Jimmy John's. But none of them were married. I shouldn't say none of them. The majority are not married, and they go to work and they want their sandwich. So in Avon, where my rush is at lunch, my rush is in the evening in Lakewood. But my rush is not in my store, the cave that's down half a level where you can't find parking. It is delivery. And now my labor is extremely high. So my son, the operations person, says, "Dad, we'll fix this, but we'll fix it by putting more drivers on." My labor is high, Tim. Don't you understand? I can't put labor on. And we've turned the corner and we're doing okay. So you have to know what your demographics are. So the power of face-to-face marketing is extremely important. Jimmy adheres to the fact that it's extremely important to take those sandwiches just like he did in that Volkswagen bus and go out and hand a sandwich to the person at their desk and say, "Here's what I can do for you. Here's how I can fit your needs. And you know what? We're just a phone call away, or we're online, and we'll bring it right out to you." And then, again, there's sometimes the need to overcome the image. We did have a bad image in Lakewood, and it is turned around. Sheffield, the book is still out, and now I'm having sleepless nights again. Okay? Okay? What I learned from this one is that I thought I had the right location. I have as much or more traffic in front of that store than I do in Avon. However, they don't turn the corner and come in. And my delivery area is smaller. So my demographics is very much like Avon over here, but it's a little bit different here. And I was talking the other day in here, and I was saying, I'm having a problem over at Sheffield. Sorry, I forgot your first name. Joe. Joe was at Fifth Third, and Joe says to me, he says, Tim, I think it lacks community. And I said, you know what? You're right. In Avon, we catered to the churches, to the schools, to the Little League. In Lakewood, we catered to the high schools, the elementary schools, and to the community. And if you travel this area here, we have the college. But if you go south, there's no churches. There's no playgrounds. And if you go north in Sheffield, we only go up to French Creek. There's no churches. There's no playgrounds. People come here to shop. They come here as a destination, and they leave. So it's, again, another thing that you have to look at. We have to look at how we're going to get people to turn the corner and come in. We'll do it, but there'll be some sleepless nights. So it's important to know your location, to know your demographics. And we also learned at this point through Cliff here at Glide and through this organization, we learned that maybe our accounting and that our bookkeeping and that our payroll systems weren't quite as streamlined as they need to be. It doesn't cost us anymore, but what we did was we had an accountant that was great for my first store, and he was okay for my second store. But when I got to the third store, I think we were beyond his capacity to understand what our growth was. It's important to understand that. It was the hardest thing I had to do was to say goodbye to my first accountant. The second is that I had a bookkeeper. I didn't know bookkeeping. I didn't understand the practices of it, and I had to go out shopping. So in Avon, I went to Jimmy John's, and I had access to their CFO, and he says, why don't you use this person? And we used a person out of Minnesota who had been the bookkeeper for 40 Jimmy John's stores. She worked really well for us. But then as we grew, distance became an issue, and timeliness became an issue. So we ended up bringing that back here in town, and along with that followed the payroll service. So one thing that I have espoused to from the day I opened, and this, you can take it or leave it, but I espoused to the fact that I bought a system. I didn't buy a restaurant. My grandfather was a very accomplished entrepreneur, the forerunner of Durkee, started a company here in town called Basic Foods, did real well, and sold off his recipes to Durkee. All those gravies, all those seasonings you have, those are things that he started. And he said, Tim, don't get in the restaurant business. I thought long and hard about that. And I didn't. I got into a systems business. So anytime we deviate from the system, I look back at my son, I look back at my staff, and I said, this is a system that was given to us. You need to stay with it. And we have. And as long as we stick with it, I think we'll be okay. So with that, I'll entertain any questions. That's my story.
Have a good day, good week, good weekend. We'll see you next Wednesday.